part tonight, but that's okay. It's about borders. Borders. Yeah.
Are you sure you're going to talk about the new immigration policies?
Yeah. This is a perfect, Eddie, can you get a shot of this? The borders, so everyone knows, that's these things you put on the edge of the quilt. This one looks like it has 3 borders, Brenda?
3, yes.
Yes.
Yep, she did the one that sort of blends in, and then 2, 3, they all look to be about an inch. Inch and a half, okay. And then she went with her binding. Now, you don't have to put a border on your quilt, Brent. She could have ended it right here.
Yes.
If she chose to do so.
Yes.
She could have put a binding
In fact,
on it right here
I
and
think
be done with it.
Did you want to use this to show what without borders?
No,
that's a
let's
different
show
thing,
that for
okay.
something else. But it doesn't, a quilt does not have to have a border on it. But we tend to put borders on it for a couple of reasons. Do you know why we put borders on our quilts?
I put them on because I like the frame. I like to frame
You
my
like to
quilt.
frame it.
I like to frame it so it looks nice.
Like you know what the
But
frame
it also
does?
keeps the thing from stretching and going crazy.
Yeah, the frame does 2 things. One, it helps bring out, it'll either help brighten up a quilt or to help
Tone it down.
tone it
Yeah.
down. It actually changes how your eye looks at the interior of this quilt. For example, if Brenda had just stuck, I'm sorry, I'll go this way. If she had just stuck with this binding here, border, you probably wouldn't even notice that there was a border here at all, because it very closely melts in, which is fine, and she could have put a binding there. But then she said, oh, I want to highlight some of the reds, because it's a red, white, and blue quilt. Actually, it's probably why you did that, right? Red, white, and blue. I just got it.
You're on top of your game,
I
Becky.
am.
I know, it was because the pattern said to.
Well, that could be too. That could be too. But it does create a frame, and it also highlights the rest of the quilt.
And at least it makes a good point. It adds size. If you remember the old,
That was exactly.
the old Thimbleberries quilts where you have like a 12-inch
Lisa
square
is
in the middle,
absolutely right.
and then you have like
47 borders?
47 borders to bring that 12-inch square out to a king-size quilt.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. The other reason we use borders is to increase the size of a quilt. Some quilts will have a series of, like you say, 6 borders. Some quilts will have none. But it's all about getting it up to the size you need it in the end. The other thing is...
A quick note on size while we're talking about this, because I had a
Okay.
call about this 3 times on Saturday.
Okay.
And I love Gail, I'm not. But Gail asked me, so I think this is important, everybody understands this.
Yeah.
She doesn't mind. Gail's a sweetheart. There is no standard size for a quilt.
No.
There is no such thing as a king-size quilt, and we can look at a book and know how
You
big
can-
a king-size quilt is.
You can guesstimate,
You can
but
guess-
if you have a specific bed in mind, you're best
To make it
measuring
to the
the bed.
There is standard.
We should show them how to measure
Yes,
that.
there's a standard size for mattresses.
Yes.
And that, if you're looking to base your quilt, base it on mattress sizes. And there is some kind of standardization a little bit on batting sizes, a little bit, but not really. And the mattress size, I should go get my book that I just brought
The
in.
problem is, and this is off topic, but not actually, because that's why we increase borders. If you have a bed, some beds are lower to the floor, some beds are higher than the floor. Some people have bed skirts, some people don't have bed skirts. So your best thing to do, if you have a bed that you're making a specific quilt for, like my Sarah Velder quilt,
I
you
thought
need
you've
to
been
measure.
working on that for years.
I know, Brent, I know. You need to measure, and also, do you want to tuck your pillows in, or are your pillows going to be outside of your quilt?
And
How
it-
much of the quilt is going to show?
And here is a.
That's another show? Okay,
I
that's
know,
another show.
I just wanted to show this. This is a little book that we got
I was
in.
going to show you how to measure for a quilt,
Yeah.
because it's really,
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
there's so many options.
But this book here is it's
okay,
an old,
it's another show. The producer said that's another show, Becky.
this is just a quick reference guide that we have.
We got to talk borders.
Yeah, but I just wanted to give people an idea when I talk about sizes. So when you talk about a size, go back to the camera because nobody cares about me reading that quote. Anyway, a twin mattress is 39 inches by 75 inches. Think of how small that is for a.
To show him, this is the book he's
Yes.
reading from, right here. The Quilter's Pocket Reference, We have them for sale at the shop for $8.95.
Yes.
So it has everything you can imagine
But
in
yes,
here.
so I'm just saying, when you talk about quilt sizes, there's no standard size. So don't call me up and say, make me a king size quilt. I don't know how big that is.
Come in and buy one of these, and it will give you a reference.
And if you say, make me a
And
twin size quilt,
And
I don't know how big
later on,
that
we'll
is.
show you how to measure a
Yes.
specific bed.
Yes.
Because
a quilt,
if you're putting a lot of work into a quilt, you want it to fall just right on the bed.
yeah, see, I don't even make my quilts for beds.
Yeah, I know.
60 by 80, that's
I
my
know, you
quilt.
make them for the dogs. You
That's for, it's for
Okay,
me,
let's
yes.
go back to
Well,
borders.
yeah, if you make them
before
for the
we run
dogs,
out
you
of
don't,
time
you don't
here.
need straight seams.
The other,
They're just
so
like
there are
you.
3 reasons. One was to frame the artwork.
Yes.
Secondly, was to increase the size of the quilt.
Yeah.
And thirdly, was to get the wonkiness out of the quilt.
This sounds like these are quiz questions for next week.
When I say wonkiness, the larger a quilt gets, a quilt top minus the borders, the larger it gets, the more likelihood it is that it is not going to measure exactly the same throughout the entire quilt. It just isn't. There's too
Unless
many.
you're Becky.
And
There's too many. No, even Becky.
And the more triangles you put into it,
It's
increases the likelihood.
There's more seam allowances. It's fabric. It's not.
And if you make, what's her
Cement.
faces? Is it Bonnie Hunter? Is that the one that makes the really intricate triangle ones that everybody thinks are awesome?
Yeah, no, it isn't Bonnie.
Is it, what's her, you know the one I'm talking about?
Judy Martin.
Maybe it's her too. But they make
Oh.
people go take classes like, oh, I made this quilt, and then I get in
Love
here
her
and it's wonky and the borders are all over the place.
Whoa.
And they're gorgeous quilts, by the way, but the borders are just out of control.
Okay, and a lot of people say, yay, my quilt top's done, all I gotta do is add my borders.
Mm-hmm.
And they think, woo, easy breezy. And they'll say 5.5-inch border, and they'll cut a 5.5 strip, and they'll line it up at the top, and they'll sew it down. And
I don't even line it up at the top.
And then they cut it off, and then they turn their quilt, and they sew it
I
again,
get-
and then they cut it
Yeah.
off, and they sew it again, and they
You
cut
are
it off.
describing my borders to a
That's
T.
how I do it.
Every time you add a border, you are increasing the wonkiness that you started with.
Mm-hmm.
The wonkiness gets bigger and bigger and bigger. You do not want to just sew
Sew.
and cut.
So, yes.
No, you do not
You
sew
don't want
and cut.
to, but I do.
Well, you don't. And here's what happens. Can we do a top down on this? Oh, wait, let me get over here. Here's what happens when it comes to the quilt shop. Pretend this is a quilt. And I've made this wonky on purpose, okay?
Oh, good. This
Can you
wasn't
see
something
that
I
it's
thought.
wonky? I put it on here so you can see it's
Can you get rid
wonky.
of the design board because it's distracting from the quilt?
Certainly, I was using it to show the unstraightness, but, okay, is that better?
Oh, looks pretty good to me.
No. And here's what happens when
See,
it
I-
gets to the,
What Brian sewed?
here's what happens when, this is what you get when you strip quilt in long strips and don't pay attention to your seams. This was what you will get.
So,
And
so
it's not uncommon.
it's something I would have sewn
You
then.
definitely would, and a lot of other people would have too. And then they'll bring it in here and they'll expect you to quilt it.
Yeah.
And the first thing Brent has to do is get it straight on the frame. So to get this straight on the frame, he's gotta get rid of this wonkiness over here, which is causing it to get pleats, or they call it easing in the quilting, right?
From a quilting standpoint, one of the problems you run into is as you roll the quilt up, if you have a wonky quilt,
Uh-huh.
you have we have a tendency to kind of pull that out as we're rolling it, so all of your wonkiness is going to end up on the bottom. So like
That's
you-
the other thing
Like
that
your
happens.
like bottom right corner looks like
It's out here.
yeah.
What would happen in a situation like this is it would be very hard to control the fullness in the middle of this quilt, because as he's rolling it and trying to keep this edge straight, guess where all that stuff is going? To the interior of the quilt. If you don't try to keep it straight, which it sounds like you don't, everything ends up over here. Because you're just pushing it to wherever it will go. One way to fix this, so your long armor can do an even better job for you, is to make sure that you don't have this kind of wonkiness before you come in. And borders can actually help you do that.
Contain the mess.
They do. Like if I just hack this off, my eyes are going to be able to tell I just hacked it off.
Mhm.
And again, a quilt this small is not usually this. I'm trying to exaggerate what happens as you get bigger and bigger. This is not unusual for a quilt this size to be out of whack that big.
Yeah.
It is not. So what you want to do is take your quilt and you want to take some measurements before you cut your borders. Before, not after.
Now, so when you get it, she's slamming the table right now.
Because that means I'm
She
serious.
is serious about this.
I am serious.
This is like quilt police level infractions right here,
It
not
is.
measuring.
You should have in your repertoire
Repertoire.
a 120-foot.
Repertoire.
What
Is that,
happened to the 120-foot one? You can't. I mean, 126
It's the
inches.
yellow one.
Yeah, what happened to it?
I don't know.
Oh, you were whipping them with it
I wasn't-
earlier.
I put it in my show drawer.
The show drawer.
Show drawer. Brett's gonna make sure he gets some retractable ones of these because I went to go get one for tonight's show and there weren't any.
Yes, we
And
have.
I
They're
said,
on
what
their
kind
way.
of quilt shop doesn't
They're
have
on their way.
a measuring tape that goes 120 inches? And I said, oh, the kind that puts their borders on in big strips and cuts them off in the end.
And
yeah,
guilty as charged.
yeah.
It's a good thing I run the long arm machine and not you.
Yeah. So there are three exact measurements.
You gotta move it a little bit more that way.
See, I got this in my, sorry, thank you.
That's all right.
3 measurements you should take before you cut your first border. One is in the middle of the quilt. You're gonna measure the width in your middle of the quilt. So it's like 14 1/8 on this one.
Mm-hmm.
You're never gonna measure all the way at the bottom, that's a no-no. Or all the way at the top, that's a no-no. Usually those are your biggest measurements. I should have walked it the other way, but I didn't. Normally you wanna come up, say if you have 6-inch blocks, I want you to come up about 6 inches, 4 inches fine. But look, on this quilt, I would have come up around here for my bottom measurement. I don't know if that's showing
Yeah.
up here. And I would have done the same thing at the top, and then I would have done the same thing in the middle, before any borders get on it.
Yeah,
I
because
would
you're
have
gonna,
taken
all your
measurement
stretch
here.
is gonna be at that first couple inches on your corners.
See, this is 13 7/8.
Yeah.
So that's a 1/4 inch off from the middle. And at the top here, it's about 13 7/8.
Don't you measure it top to bottom?
Well, I will, but
Okay, well, I do the top and bottom first because I always put my sides on, my side borders on first.
my quilt's just oriented differently. I put side borders on first too. This
Okay.
is my top, this is my bottom.
Oh. Okay.
No, I measured the wrong thing.
And just,
I do always put the sides on first.
and just for your information.
Yes.
I did measure those borders.
I'm sure you
Each
did.
one,
Well, yeah, did you measure after each border?
no.
Okay, well, you can get away with it on a small border. Once your borders
Right.
get wider, you really should measure after each border is put on your quilt.
I just cut them according to the size they told me.
Oh my Lord. Okay, so now I've measured, okay, and mine don't all match. But they're within a 1/2 inch, right?
Yeah.
They're within 1/2 inch. So I consider that great. If you measure up on a large quilt and you're within a 1/2 inch, don't be discouraged. That's actually very good. That's
So
good.
we have 3 numbers. Which one do you use now?
You now average those 3 numbers.
We have to do math?
You do. You add them up, you divide by 3, and that's the length I want you to cut your strip.
No, it's the
So if it calls
average.
for 5.5 inch strip, that doesn't change, but the length of your strip, and Brenda's right.
Isn't the
Mine's-
average different than the mean?
Yes, it is different than the mean.
So what if we
Average
wanna
is you add 3.
And
If
divide
I'm
by 3.
adding
Yeah,
3
so-
numbers, I add 3 numbers and
go
divide by 3.
So how'd you get the
That-
mean then?
I don't need the mean.
I know, but I wanna know how to get it.
The mean you would put, why? You
I
can't,
don't know.
the mean on this one, I don't know, because there's 2 numbers that are exactly alike, so the mean's the middle point.
Okay, I'm just
You
curious.
you
I
know
thought that was a
that.
median.
Oh, for goodness sakes, I quit. I'm here to tell you how to measure for borders.
Average. Get the average.
Okay, yeah, get the average. And then after you put those on, and you should do your sides first. You should.
Yes.
Also, another tip when you're cutting your material, and this, we don't always do this because, you know, material's expensive, but if you can cut straight to grain, that's gonna give you straighter borders. That means this is my salvage, and if I can cut this way on my fabric,
I'm gonna switch.
sorry, if I can cut this way on my straight to grain, here's my salvage, if I can cut this way, I'm gonna get much more stable borders. Just because of the way fabric is made. It stretches less this way than it does this way.
Mm-hmm.
So lots of times we can't justify cutting a border this long, you know, having 6 yards of something. So what we do instead is we cut it perpendicular to straight grain, which is up and down like this. But
Okay.
if you're piecing your border, which I'm a fan of piece borders.
Just because my mom is watching and she
Yes.
wanted to set us straight.
Yes.
The mean and the average are the same thing. The median is the other one.
Thank you, Becky.
Sorry.
Is there anything else you need to correct?
That's the teacher.
Well, the average I got right, and
Yeah.
that's all I care about in quilting. Jeepers creepers. Okay, so straighter grain when you can. If you're piecing a border, which I like piece borders, straighter grain can give you real stable fabric, and you could, you know, she could have done red, white, blue, 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 in little chunks and pieced it together too.
So if you're doing, oh, never mind.
Yeah, piece borders is a whole nother,
So
Topic.
when you put your borders together at a 45, because it looks better than a straight seam.
you mean when you're like,
Maybe we're putting 2 pieces together.
yes, yes,
Should we worry about the stretch that's created by that 45-degree cut?
no.
Okay.
No, especially on hers, they're smaller, but
Oh,
no.
yeah.
And the reason we do the 45 degree is it's less noticeable.
Yeah.
Like I can see them because I'm looking for them,
Yeah.
but you cannot just see
Yeah,
them
so when
on
you're
this
yeah.
particular
A lot of
quilt.
times when
They
you piece-
hide better in the quilt if you do
45,
it on
yeah.
a 45. So that's just that.
Okay.
So then the next trick is when you go to pin, and this is where I said your pinning is not so. I'm just going to do an example here real quick. Remember your perpendicular pinning thing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now pretend I've measured this. It's exactly what I needed, right?
Yeah, you're not doing it like I would, just slap it on there and go.
Well, no.
You're gonna
This is
measure.
cut. This is exactly the right measurement I needed. Okay, it's not exactly fitting right. I need to put a big X here, don't I?
I was gonna actually do that at one
The
point.
first things you're going to do is you're going to pin, similar to what we did when we did the strips, you're going to pin at the top, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to pin at the bottom. We're pretending this is cut exact, okay?
Are you gonna sew from the middle out in
No,
both directions?
No, but I'm going to
That
pin.
would be awesome if you did. That would be like
I'm
super
going to pin the
hardcore.
top and bottom. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the middle,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to pin.
Now does the middle become the median?
Shush. Or this pin's going to become, you're
Gonna
going to
stick a
become
needle
my
in my
pin cushion.
eye.
And then I'm going to go to the middle of this one. I'm going to end up with, you're going to love me, I'm going to end up with pins every 4 inches.
So you're just gonna keep cutting it in half and
Keep cutting it in half. That's how you're going to pin it on. That's how you're going to work in any of the imperfections that you might have in your quilt. And you're going to keep going.
You're not gonna fold it in half though?
She
Like,
doesn't do that.
you don't fold it and like pinch it, so you know where the middle is?
Well, you in a big quilt, yes, I guess you could, but I usually just eyeball. But yeah, you can fold and pinch it. But when you get to the sections,
did you say fold and pinch
fold
it?
and pinch it. When you get to these small sections,
Finger craft, okay?
I don't fold. I just go halfway through. I keep eyeballing halfway through until I get. Now, obviously, this is a dinky little quilt, so it doesn't take long. But if it was a longer quilt, you could see I would spend all that time pinning. And then, if you were Brent
Well, you know I have an
and
allergy
you
to
really
pin.
didn't want anything to move, you could use the perpendicular pinning technique as well.
But I have an allergy to pins, so is there an
I know you do.
alternative? I'm gonna claim
Nothing beats pinning,
I'm
I'm
claiming
sorry,
a
on the
medical
borders.
exemption to this border technique.
I have not, I guess you could use your glue, but I would not. I am out of pins. But this is the perpendicular pin technique as well.
Yeah.
And I thought that was pretty cool that, it would give your border even more security as you were going. But that's how you would work it in. So what's happening is, I gotta do a diagram. What's happening is.
Diagram.
We're gonna get a diagram.
As
We
you're
need a
going
visual-
out,
It's a visual aid.
I do have a visual aid.
Some visual
I
aids
almost
in the
brought a
diagram.
grease board, but I didn't. Let's pretend,
We
Here
can
we
get an
go.
erase board.
this was the quilt I started with. And I'm gonna make them a little wonky over here, okay? That's not that wonky for a finished top. You see how this side is bigger over here?
I do.
This side's gonna measure bigger than that side, correct?
Yes.
And it's gonna be different than in the middle. Now, let's say I put a small border on that, but I do it your way.
Okay.
I sew here. I sew here.
Did you ever watch the Three Stooges?
I sew here. And I sew here. What's happened, and I'm not worried about measurements. What's happened, this is grown even larger.
You just extended the wonkiness.
Yeah. Now it's time for me to add another border.
And that wonkiness just continues.
And I don't measure. See, I'm telling you, you're gonna measure every time you put a border on. Every time. If I'm putting 3 borders on, I'm doing this technique 3 times.
3 borders, 3 times.
Yeah.
But
Every time I
but
put a
that's
border.
every border. That's actually 4 times because there's a border on each
Okay,
side.
whatever.
That's like
But
12
what?
times.
Watch
you know
what
how many pins
happens.
that is?
You do the sides
Holy
again.
cow.
I'm doing the sides again. Now I got a bigger border. Guess what? Now I got even more wonkiness.
Why not just do 1 border instead of the 3 and just make it really big?
You just put that side at the top.
You
A
know,
general rule of thumb on your borders is don't go more than half the size of the block in the quilt. Because then it starts to look,
Take away.
Yeah.
it starts to look ugly. It defeats the purpose. So that's a general rule of thumb. So if you're doing a 12-inch block, you don't want more than a 6-inch border. So let's say I have to grow the quilt 20 inches. I don't want you putting a 20-inch piece of fabric on it. That's gonna look like crap. We wanna break it up. And
Seems to me if you're trying to go 20 inches, you might just want to add more blocks.
well,
at that
and there's
point.
some beautiful blocks that make gorgeous borders, and I
Yeah.
won't bore you with that all tonight, but that's what I want to talk about, is alternatives to just the strips. And that's why I said, here's a challenge for Brenda.
Oh, God.
Do we still have the Barbie quilt or did we sell that?
Well, see, there's a perfect, that,
No, we have the Barbie.
The Barbie
lots of times
Oh,
we
yeah.
quilt? So
think,
we'll bring that out next week because that's a good.
Okay.
lots of times we think we need a panel for the middle of our quilt. You don't need a panel for the middle of the quilt. You can just use a fabric you're in love with.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
And that is the greatest fabric ever made that you're holding
yes,
right now.
it is.
That fabric.
Picture this,
When we all
Brenda.
die and go to heaven, that's what we're going to be dressed in.
This is, treat this as a panel in the middle of your quilt.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
And
I
then-
made a panel quilt. It's gotta go on the,
We got your show and tell on it?
Sure.
he hasn't quilted it.
Picture this as, you're using this as the panel
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of your quilt. A
Yeah.
big block, gigantic block.
Yeah, just like nice.
Now you take all the colors that are in here and you make pieced blocks around it. They become your border.
Oh, how fancy.
You could do pinwheels, you could do 4 squares, you could just imagine the possibilities with this.
But your math has to be pretty good because you have to figure out how many pinwheels you need so that you're not cutting like a pinwheel, like, cutting off the last half inch so it fits on
You
that side of
definitely
it.
have to get your graph paper out or electric quilt. That's what I would do.
Okay.
An electric quilt.
Well,
And
we
I
have, a,
would
we, have
just-
a, we have a quilt we'll show next week where I didn't do any math and we still put pinwheels in the borders.
Okay, but pieced blocks make beautiful borders or a combination thereof. You could
Yeah.
do a strip and then a pieced
Oh,
border,
yeah.
you know, so anyway, that's further
Okay.
border stuff. But anyway, all right, we're over, sorry.
You'll be over. It's all right.
Sorry, I wanted to show
Everybody
you
was
how to
having fun.
miter
How many
borders
people
too.
did we have
'cause
watching today?
people want to know how to miter borders, so next week, I want.
Borders. That's yeah. Well,
No, it's not as hard as you think it is.
I know it's not.
Even if you've got stripes,
Yeah.
it's really, imagine it with it. It just,
So we're gonna do more borders next week.
yeah, because I didn't get to them all.
Okay. Yeah, because I know I was bad this week. We're all over the map today.
That's all right. So the challenge is come in and get some of this and show me a
Don't
piece
buy it
border.
all though, because I love this fabric and I didn't get to make anything last time we had it.
I want to see one of these with a pieced border.
Okay, I've got plans for it now.
I want to see
That's
with
gonna be a Brent special.
I want to see with a piece border. I think it would be really awesome
I'm having plans for it.
with all these pretty
It's coming
little
together.
bright colors.
But I have to finish my t-shirt quilt first.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I think that's it. I was going to show you how to measure this one, but we'll save that for another time.
Okay.
But Brenda made this, so I'm sure measures perfectly.
It will tomorrow when she trims
It will tomorrow. No,
She trims it.
you don't need to be squaring up your quilt before you measure for your borders, because that's going to create other issues. In fact, if you've got like Brenda had on this one, you've got points that you got to go with. See that? You got to get these points right. You want to make sure you still got a 1/4 inch from that point over. You don't want to be hacking up your whole quilt and then swallowing your points. You don't want that.
God, no.
We'll show you how to do that.
Oh,
too.
yeah.
There's a trick to that.
Yeah, just trim it and.
Very rarely is the quilt top perfectly square before you start your borders.
And what fun
Just-
would that be if it was?